My name is Danielle York. I'm 42 years old, a retired U.S. Army combat medic. I've served in 5 conflict zones, patched wounds under mortar fire, and held hands that didn't get a second chance. But none of that seemed to matter the day I got served papers. From my own brother. The headline was simple. Daniel York is a fraud. He says I made up everything, that I never saved his life in Afghanistan, that I built a fake hero story to steal our father's land. It's not just the lawsuit, it's what came with it. The silence, the whispers, the cold nods from relatives who used to brag about my service. But that's the part people don't understand. Betrayal doesn't always come with screaming. Sometimes it comes in legal print, neatly stapled, signed by someone who used to braid your hair. Let me take you back to the moment it started unraveling. It was a Tuesday, sky clear, coffee hot, silence in the house thick enough to slice. I opened the envelope at the kitchen counter. Same one where I used to write letters to Dad. Same place I called Eli the night he got home from rehab. Same spot I made peace with being invisible. Inside, a legal challenge to the will, filed by Eli, represented by our aunt, Margaret Leeds, my mother's sister, my godmother, the woman who used to kiss my forehead before every deployment. Now she was saying I'd manipulated Dad while he was dying, forged records, faked my service, used a trauma narrative to seize the ranch. Here, what they didn't know. I didn't want the land. I just wanted a place where no one asked if I was still broken. But now, they weren't just taking my home. They were trying to take my name. They didn't believe I pulled Eli out of that crater. Didn't believe I carried 200 pounds of dead weight through a kill zone. Didn't believe I tied a tourniquet on a bleeding artery while rounds lit up the sky. Because if they did believe me, they'd have to admit something worse, that I was stronger than they ever allowed me to be. I called Aunt Margaret, not to argue, just to ask one thing. Do you really think I made it up? Her pause said more than her answer. I think you've always wanted more than what you were given, and maybe you convinced yourself you earned it. That's when I knew this wasn't about land. It was about control. And she was still pulling Eli's strings, just like when we were kids. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't post online for sympathy. I went to the garage, opened the old footlocker, the one with the dust still clinging like memory. Inside was the evidence they'd forgotten. Tour maps, field logs, my medical kit still blood-stained, and a folded note, written in Eli's handwriting back when he still remembered. Thank you for not leaving me behind. He doesn't remember writing that, or maybe he doesn't want to, but I do. And I always will. This wasn't going to be a courtroom drama. This was going to be war, not with weapons, but with truth. And I wasn't the only one preparing. Because the night before my court response was due, a flash drive appeared in my mailbox. No name, just a sticky note. You'll need this. And trust me, what was on that drive? It didn't just destroy their version of the story. It rewrote who the real villain was. But I'll tell you more in a moment. If you've ever been the one who stayed silent, because it was easier than being accused of making it up, this story is for you. If someone ever tried to erase what you survived, you're not alone. And if this kind of story hits home, subscribe, there's more coming, because the truth, it doesn't vanish, it waits, just like I did. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, because of clarity. The kind that only comes when someone tries to burn down the truth, and you suddenly remember exactly where you buried the fireproof box. That flash drive sat on my kitchen table like a loaded weapon. No name, no logo. Just a yellow sticky note, 5 words, you'll need this in court. I plugged it in, hands shaking, but not from nerves, from adrenaline. That slow, bitter kind that builds when you realize someone's been planning your downfall longer than you've been healing. There were 3 folders, labeled like a checklist. 1 Eli emails, 2 Margaret strategy, 3 media packet, predated. That last one, that's where the air left my lungs. First, the emails. Pages of correspondence between Eli and Margaret. Strategic, clinical, labeled by weeks. Each file stamped and dated months before Dad even passed. They weren't reacting. They were preparing, drafting the narrative, planting the doubt. One message from Margaret read, "Her trauma is her weakness. We shape public doubt through quiet questions, not accusations. Once the seed is planted, the military history becomes noise." Second folder, Strategy. An 18-slide document, color-coded, outlining how to challenge my medical records, link my PTSD to delusional memory recall, and frame me as unstable. They'd consulted a crisis PR firm. You know the kind. Used by senators with scandals and Fortune 500 CEOs, not families. Third folder, Media Packet, a full press kit, articles already ghostwritten. Headlines like, "Former Army Medic, Fabricated Heroic Story to Claim Land from Grieving Father." Military sources question validity of decorated sister's claims. There were even fake testimonies, quotes from people I'd never met. Anonymous but convincing. They weren't just trying to beat me in court. They were building a version of the world where I never existed. I stared at the screen for almost an hour, not blinking, not crying, just calculating. And then I clicked open the final attachment. Video, low-res, time-stamped, drone footage, the crater, the field hospital, the blood trail, a medic moving through fire, dragging a soldier across debris. One leg limp, the angle was wide. But I knew the body posture, the limp in the left side, the field bag taped at the strap. It was me, and the soldier being pulled, Eli. They had this video, they had it the whole time, they saw it, and still, they tried to destroy me. Not because they didn't believe, but because they couldn't afford for anyone else to. I printed everything, filed it, copied it to 4 separate drives, one in my safe, one at the bank, 2 with people I trusted more than blood. Then I called my lawyer. Her voice was calm, but I heard the inhale. That small pause you hear when someone realizes this case just shifted tectonic plates. "Danielle," she said, "this isn't just defense material. This is premeditated character assassination. This is criminal." And she was right, but what she didn't say out loud, what we were both thinking, was this: they hadn't expected me to fight. They expected me to fold, to vanish like most veterans with invisible wounds, to walk away because the battle felt too much like the battlefield. But that was their first mistake. Their second mistake. They assumed I was still fighting alone. But the very next day, someone knocked on my door, and the person standing there, he knew exactly what happened in Afghanistan, because he was there too, and he wasn't going to stay quiet any longer. He knocked twice. Not hard, not rushed. Just 2 calm, solid taps, like someone who wasn't here to apologize, but to testify. I opened the door. There he was, Corporal Elias Brick Marlowe, my team's comms officer. Taller than I remembered, more lines on his face, but the same quiet in his eyes. We hadn't spoken in 8 years. He didn't say, "Hey." Didn't say, "Long time." He just handed me an envelope. "It's not much," he said. "But it's true." Inside were 2 things, a photo and a letter. The photo, our unit, fob nightfall, me crouched over Eli, tourniquet half-wrapped, face bloody, fingers splayed. Brick in the background, headset on, calling for a medevac. The letter, sworn testimony, 3 pages, signed, dated, notarized. He stepped inside, sat at my kitchen table like he never left. Same table where I read the lawsuit. Same place Eli once slept when he was too drunk to drive. "I kept quiet because I thought you didn't want to revisit it," Brick said. "But then I saw the news, the headlines, the accusations, and I knew. They weren't just trying to silence you. They were trying to erase what we lived through." Brick told me things I'd forgot. The smell of burnt fuel. The sound Eli made when he came to. How I refused to leave him. Even when Brick told me the second RPG was inbound, I had stayed, tied 2 tourniquets, lifted a man bigger than me, and walked 50 yards through open fire. "You saved him," Brick said, "and you lost part of yourself in that crater. Don't let them pretend it never happened." We talked for hours, not just about the war, but about what came after, the silence, the shame, the way families, even the well-meaning ones, start treating your pain like an inconvenience. Brick had no stake in the lawsuit, no inheritance, no house, no blood ties, just truth. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, he filed the statement with the court, not through my lawyer, on his own, independent witness. Then he held a press conference. 5 minutes, no anger, just facts. He stood in front of cameras, wearing his old service jacket, and he said, "Danielle York didn't fabricate anything. I was there. I saw her carry her brother out of hell." What she didn't say was that she also carried me. The media flipped, headlines that once read, "Did she lie?" Now read, "Decorated medic, vindicated by eyewitness testimony." And Eli, he went dark. No tweets, no interviews, no videos from the vineyard or his podcast room, because the narrative was no longer his to spin. But I wasn't done, because truth isn't just about proving yourself right. It's about exposing the system that let this happen in the first place. Margaret, the ghostwriter behind the entire smear campaign. Her name started appearing in the corners of emails and leaked invoices. The PR firm denied involvement, but someone had forwarded me a receipt, $24,000, billed for reputation pivot strategy, paid from Eli's business account, timestamped 2 months before Dad passed. So when I walked into court that Monday morning, I didn't walk in with just a folder. I walked in with a witness, a war map, and a paper trail. They called it a civil case, but what happened next turned it into something much bigger. Because when the judge read the first page, his face changed, and then he said 5 words that changed everything: "Close the doors, no one leaves." The courtroom smelled like old wood, cold air, and something else. Anticipation or dread. It was hard to tell the difference. I wore a black suit, no uniform, no ribbons, because I wasn't here to prove I had served. I was here to prove I had been betrayed. The judge entered. The clerk called the case. York v. York. And just like that, years of silence were about to become evidence. Eli sat at the plaintiff's table, clean-shaven, hair swept perfectly, smiling for the cameras like this was just another press appearance. Beside him, Margaret, my aunt. My godmother, dressed in navy, pearls, poise, but her fingers tapped the table, the only tell. My lawyer began with the basics: military record, service evaluations, deployment history. Then she called Brick. He walked to the stand, slow and steady, swore in, and looked Eli in the eyes just once. "My name is Elias Marlowe. I served with Sergeant Danielle York. I watched her drag her brother out of a crater while under active fire." Then he paused, just enough to let it hurt. If she hadn't done what she did, Eli York would be dead. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact. Gasps from the gallery. One of the reporters dropped a pen. But Eli didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just stared forward, like someone who had rehearsed too long to remember how to react. Next, we played the drone video. No music, no cuts, just reality. You could see me. Bloody, limping, hunched over Eli's unconscious body. A ghost dragging a ghost. It played for 26 seconds. That's all it took. Even the judge looked away near the end. My attorney walked to the bench and laid down the folder, the one with the flash drive, the emails, the fake media kit, the PR invoice, the forged documents, the timeline, the motive. She didn't say a word, she didn't have to. The judge opened the folder. Read the first page, then the second, then the third. His eyebrows drew in, his jaw locked. And then, finally, he looked up, closed the doors, no one leaves. 2 officers moved to the exits. Quiet, professional, prepared. Margaret's eyes widened barely, her smile cracked. Eli's hand clenched so tight the tendons showed. But neither of them moved. The judge turned to the clerk. "Mark this record. Evidence submitted suggests coordinated fraud, forgery, obstruction of justice, and potential perjury under oath." He faced Eli. "Mr. York, do you wish to withdraw your case before criminal proceedings begin?" Eli didn't answer. Couldn't. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something sharp and fast. But Margaret, she stood up, straightened her jacket, and said, "Your Honor, my client has nothing to hide." The judge nodded slowly. "Good, then neither do I." The courtroom shifted. A new energy filled the air, like something sacred had just broken loose, and there was no way to put it back. The judge ruled to suspend the civil suit, pending federal investigation. My name, my story, my record, Cleared in less than 20 minutes. I didn't look at Eli. Didn't need to. He was no longer the face on stage. He was just a man with no narrative left to stand on. And Margaret, she stood still, arms crossed tight, like she was trying to keep the walls from collapsing in on her. But what came next wasn't applause. It wasn't closure. It was something quieter and far more powerful. Because I didn't leave that courtroom with a check. I left with something I hadn't had in years. Peace. The courthouse hallway was colder than I remembered. Fluorescent lights, polished tile, footsteps echoing like old regrets. But this time, none of them were mine. I didn't wait for the reporters, didn't check the headlines, didn't glance back at the courtroom doors. I just walked down the steps, into the wind, and let it hit me, not like a storm, not like a fight, but like something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. Clean, whole, quiet. Brick stood beside the car, arms crossed. He didn't say anything, just nodded once. And that was enough. Because some people don't need long speeches. They just show up, over and over, until you believe you're worth showing up for. Back home, I didn't unpack right away, didn't scrub the floor, didn't fix the garden. I just sat on the old porch swing Dad built the summer I turned 13, wrapped in the same flannel blanket I took to basic training. Watched the wind move through the trees like breath, and for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next battle. I wasn't preparing a defense. I wasn't rehearsing who I needed to be for them. I was just me, Danielle, veteran, daughter, sister, whole. A week later, I got a letter, no return address, just my name again. But this time, the handwriting was Eli S. Inside was a single line. I don't remember everything, but I remember the way you looked at me when I opened my eyes, and I think that might be enough. No apology, no explanation, just something human. I folded the note, tucked it into my field journal, didn't call him, didn't need to. Some distances don't need to be closed. They just need to be understood. I didn't rebuild my name, because it was never broken. But I did start something else. A small group for female vets, the ones who came home invisible. The ones whose stories got edited out. We meet in the old barn once a month. No agenda, no structure, just stories and space. Some wars end with gunfire, some with gavels, but the hardest ones end with forgiveness, not for them, for yourself, because survival is loud. But peace is a whisper, and sometimes that whisper is enough. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever had to fight just to be believed, you're not alone. Subscribe, there's more coming. More stories that remind us we're still here, still standing, and finally, free.